Okay, so today's update is Bad Grandpa, some final touches at the end of the season for 2022. We have swapped back in the 67 mil turbo, which I still have the 3-inch inlet filter set up for that, so I put that in there. I ran it once. The oil feed line I have to go back in and set up, put some sealant down on the threads in there, and I think because this has a coolant, water-cooled center section, I got to double check the fittings, make sure those are sealed. My idle valve wire, I'm going to check continuity from that to the PCM, but I think one of the motor wires that sends the idle valve in and out to modulate the airflow for idle is not working properly, so I'm going to put a new wire on that. And it turns out I was getting some heat soak. I'll show you the data here. Basically climbing throughout the run, and this is only for an 1/8 mile it was climbing that much. So the coolant going through our little air water core down there, down in the fender well, is heating up too much during just a 7, 8, 9 second 1/8 mile run, which is way too quick. So I'm going to change out the Bosch normal, like Cobra style standard intercooler water pump, and that way we can flow more by going to a Rule 2000 style bilge pump that I will have to put in the trunk tank, which I'll have to take out after I drain the system. So a lot of work I'm going to be doing on this, and I may just skip ahead because it's a pain to film while I'm working. I'm trying to just get it done so that hopefully in the next week's time there's only a few October testing tunes at tracks in the local area before they're all shut down for the season. But along with that, we've got the Camaro here, pretty much done. We've got some underdash wiring we're still trying to clean up. So some of the brake switch wires on that were messing up, and that was screwing with the way the tail lights were not working when he pressed the brake lights. But the good news is the engine's all back together. It runs real smooth. We're real happy with that. So just got a little intake on there. We've got the header pipes down there, and we went through and just changed some tie rod ends, some sway bar bushings, control arm bushings up there were real bad. You can see it's kind of rotten up in the mount, but he went ahead and went to a pressed in some new bushings, because those two on the top, the upper control arm, were walking around on them. So that's all ready to go. We may do kind of a just garage floor string alignment on this just to make sure it's fairly squared away. And other than that, this is about ready to go. We're just fixing some wiring issues from the lights. We took out a remote start, I believe it was, or an alarm, one or the other. It was this rat's nest of wires. I can show you the picture here. So all that was under the dash, wired in very poorly. So we wanted to get all that out of there and just clean up a lot of factory wiring, put it back to normal. So the Camaro, about ready to go. And one last project I started is our rear-wheel drive build for next year. So I'm going to take my old L26 that had an XP cam in it with my bone stock heads that have been with my old 98 GTP forever. And these had just 105 springs on them, just kind of the standard XP cam install. We eventually went to the higher NA compression top swap style. So any of the NA guys out there doing top swaps, these things always perform like a dream with a positive displacement blower that you don't want to really work too hard. And then I upgraded that. So we've got this MP112 kit. It uses an old Gen 1 style ZZP intercooler as an adapter plate. We're going to clean all this up, make it real nice. I'm probably going to try and polish that machined aluminum Terrell Smith kind of inspired me to do some cleanup, so maybe we'll talk to him about getting with his powder coat shop or doing something to make this look real nice, because it's going to be sitting on top of this engine, pointing forward in the engine bay, just like this, but possibly in a different chassis, just so that way we can fit it pretty good. So my double roller timing chain, for those who don't know, I snapped one of those back in 2005 or 6. Basically, that's when we started making sure that everybody spaced the front cover off nicely when you run these, because unfortunately, without being able to run a tensioner on these, and this one's only been on there for probably 30K, but it happens to all of them. I put a fresh chain on Bad Grandpa during the 2020 or 2021 rebuild. They do get a little slop. You can only run a tensioner from here on a single chain, so you have to kind of deal with that. They stretch out after, I would say, probably 10 or 20K, and then they just kind of stay there. So that gives a little bit of front to back movement on the crank gear while it's in there, which unfortunately can cause it to rub the outer links of the chain against the front cover if you don't space it properly. So we're cleaning this engine up, and we're going to start doing upgrades to it. I think we might go with a real big cam. The only problem being heads. The only ported heads I have are on Bad Grandpa, and I don't want to dismantle Bad Grandpa back there while it's still doing good things, still trying to perform on the track and have fun just driving to work and back. So what we're probably going to do is, if anybody out there has ported heads they want to sell for a decent price, we might pick them up, or we might see what's out there. I'd rather not try and do porting myself. I might talk to a local shop, see if they want to cut us a deal. But the inside of this engine looked great. It's only seen Mobile 1 for the entire 30-40K I drove it. And we got this engine, this 2006 Buick L26, with just over 1,000 miles. I think it had 1,600 miles when whatever poor grandpa or grandma crashed their Buick LaCrosse. I think it came out of up in Minnesota back in 06, 07. So this thing's still pretty cherry. You can still see some of the markings that say back when it was inspected in October of 2006 or 2005, excuse me. But I really love this engine. I had a lot of fun with it in my GTP. Pulled it out because the GTP rusted away, and it's been promised that that supercharger would get to do some fun rear-wheel drive stuff, and we're gonna get to it real soon. So other than that, the old L32 with the spun bearing and my spare Holden intake is just rested and waiting. That was my GTP's stock transmission, and we've got basically our spare motor out of a 2007, I believe it was, I got that out of, and that's just in reserve. Emergencies and accidents happen, so we've just got an L32 on standby for when that happens, because we're pushing things hard. They might break. Terrell warned me that he's seen issues. I know ZZP has seen issues with L26s when you push them pretty hard, and aside from a turbo or a centrifugal supercharger, you can't use anything better than a bigger supercharger on top of it to push it real hard. We've already had over 400 horse on this thing with the Gen 5 supercharger. 400 to the crank. It was mid 300s wheel, so it'll be well above that when we get that really spun up. We've never really pushed it real hard with that, but we will. So I just wanted to keep everybody updated. I've got the new parts for Bad Grandpa right here, the new idle connector, the 2,000 gallon per hour bilge pump for going into the trunk tank And then I have the electronics for the cutout right now pulled apart because we hadn't used it for a while. I rebuilt my downpipe because my race pipe was broken, even though it had the connection for the cutout kind of slapped on there at one point years and years ago before the flex pipe blew out. We got a fresh one, but they did not sell race pipes, so we kind of had to make our own. So that's the remnants of the one I bought a year or so ago, and we currently have the race pipe on there. We can always swap back to something more regulated later on, but that's not what we're doing right now with Bad Grandpa. So I'll leave it at that. Gonna see the Camaro. We're gonna get some stock numbers out of this thing. I mean, close to stock. All it's got is an intake and headers, basically for performance. We'll see if the transmission in this thing holds up. I am gonna convert it to a 98 PCM so that it's a little bit more tune friendly, because these 96 ones were, the very, very early OBD2. They went through a couple changes because they weren't fully integrated in all the systems and the programming wasn't quite squared away yet. So it's much easier if I have a 98 computer in there, and we'll make it very easy to work with. So Bad Grandpa getting ready to go to the track. We've got some maintenance on some vehicles to do, but the fun projects are coming. So I'm real excited to get this going and let everybody see what a supercharged 3.8 can really do in rear-wheel drive configuration, because only a few folks have done them in these cars. It's kind of a pain with that cowl, and we're going to try and overcome that with some ideas that I've got, and it might tick off some other 3.8 folks along the way when they realize there was better projects to put together, and nobody's done really what we're about to do. So it's kind of exciting. I'm ready to bring everybody along over the next year as we start this project. So we'll leave it at that.